monster movies, especially the ones with this guy, are some of my absolute favorites to watch. On this channel I usually just review animated films, and yes, I will eventually get that House Moving Castle review out at some date. But today I wanted to do something different. I want to review Gojira 1954, the original Japanese version. It's a very meaningful and well-constructed film, and that is why I want to review it. Quick warning, if you are uncomfortable with death and horrors of radiation and war, now would be a good time to leave. Know what I'm saying? According to my statistics, nobody has even made it this far into the video. So thanks to the one guy still watching. Since I watched the original version of this movie, I will be referring to this guy as Gojira, his original title. Now it may be a surprise to some of you, especially with this new movie out, but Gojira used to be a much more grounded and dark character, symbolizing the fear of the atomic bomb. He's a purely an antagonistic force, not the one to save the day. Yet the filmmakers were still able to balance this character by making him tragic. Gojira is the way he is because of what we did to him. The H-bomb testings carried out by the United States throughout the 50s has awakened this prehistoric monster. His skin charred and damaged by the bombs. Now he leaves harmful levels of radiation in his wake. He climbs to the surface, possibly just looking for a new home, since his has probably been blasted away, and spoilers here, at the end this poor creature is killed by the very species that created him. Gojira's charge through Tokyo is hard to watch. Unlike his newer films, the human casualties aren't off-screen or not mentioned. They are the main focus of his rampage. This film does a better job, at least I would say, of having this scene carry so much more weight and sadness to the audience than its 2016 counterpart. It all starts when Gojira surfaces in the bay. I'm sure a lot of you are acquainted with Gojira's theme, and while that theme is in the movie, it's not Gojira's theme, no. His theme was a lot more ominous and foreboding, consisting of what sounds like someone smashing a single key of a piano over and over again. The military has set up a line of electrical power lines to deter Gojira. The plan is the shock will make Gojira think twice and turn away. However, Gojira walks straight through the power lines like they are nothing. Of course, now is a good time to get into the symbology and metaphors here. Towards the end of World War II, Japan's military and its air force were extremely weakened, allowing America to fly overhead and drop the bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Gojira proceeds towards the city of Tokyo, which has not been evacuated. This is where Gojira begins his rampage. Remember, this is supposed to be a nuclear bomb going off in slow motion, and Gojira is unforgiving. When the military fights back, he begins to burn the city to the ground. This movie does not hold back and shows you the civilian deaths. One that has circulated a lot is the mother clutching her kids and saying, "Don't worry, we'll soon be with your father." Admittedly, this makes people uncomfortable, as it should, but it shows you directly the pain inflicted onto Japan at the end of the war. Kids were killed in that blast that leveled Hiroshima, families destroyed. Also, even more disturbingly, this movie came out less than a decade after these incidents, meaning these memories were still very much fresh in people's eyes. Another death I think deserves a little more recognition is Gojira walking over and killing a group of reporters. Props to this reporter for continuing his broadcast up until the very end. It is extremely dark when the reporter says his last words, "This really is the end. Farewell, ladies and gentlemen." Professional, yet dark. Gojira also finds the time to march up to this government building, and he leaves it mostly intact. Not sure if they're trying for some more symbolism here, but it's interesting to speculate. Anyway, Gojira returns to the sea. I have to say, for the 50s, the special effect work holds up pretty well. Enough of it takes me out of the experience. However, I myself may be biased because I am very acquainted with seeing a guy in a suit, and I can suspend my disbelief to that level. But the suit design and model work of the city is really good. Gojira is terrifying. There's one part where he looks directly at the screen like he's looking directly at you with his eye. Chilling. Another thing that is often neglected in these newer movies is the aftermath. Of course, this destruction will have outgoing permanent effects. This is where we get to the hardest part of the movie to watch. The hospitals and makeshift places of care become overfilled with sick and dying people, emulating the injuries caused by the nuclear blast, such as the terrible scarring and burns, not to mention the radiation. In the scene, a doctor holds up a Geiger counter at a kid. He turns to the nurse and shakes his head. Another even harder part to get through, just because this kid's acting is so good, is when a mother dies. A A perfect way to show even if you weren't killed in the initial blast, you're still not safe, the radiation can come back and kill you. It's a heavy subject matter, I know, but this is what it is. This movie's goal is to show you and or remind you of the devastation caused. Also, seriously, did they actually tell that girl her mother died? Because her acting is suspiciously good. It is a difficult scene to watch, but it's meant to be. Of course, the saddest part is just how hard the economy must have been hit by this. It's so funny to me how much the human cast of these newer movies are complained about by the fans. Without realizing the original Gojira, the focus is on the human characters, just as much, if not more than Gojira. You can't review this movie without talking about them. To lead this movie, you have Dr. Serizawa, Emiko, Ogata, and Yamane. To this day, they remain the best, most iconic, and memorable characters of the franchise. Also, really sorry if I mispronounced any of these names. This movie really reminds me of the book Jurassic Park and the Lost World, both by Michael Crichton, surprisingly enough, both in how they utilize their characters for ethical debates, and the messages of exploiting nature than facing the consequences of these actions. Dr. Serizawa is instantly recognizable by his eye patch, for he lost his eye in the war. Now he spends most of his time in his lab. He has created a new weapon, the smallest amount of it capable of removing flesh from bone of any creature unlucky enough to be near it. This is the only weapon able to kill Gojira. One problem, however, Serizawa refuses to use it. Serizawa can see that releasing the information of this weapon to the world will be disastrous. What government wouldn't want another even more powerful weapon that can destroy the entire world? This is a metaphor for the classic argument. Was the United States justified in bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki? See, the bombs were used because the projections for the land invasion of the island of Japan predicted mass casualties. It would be D-Day on a whole new level, so the bombs were seen as a better option, a way to scare Japan into giving up.
Substantial portions of Japan's key industrial centers have been leveled to the ground in a series of record incendiary raids. What has already happened to Tokyo will happen to every Japanese city whose industries feed the Japanese war machine.
Was it worth it to kill so many people in such a fashion? Was it really worth it to introduce the world to a weapon that can destroy it? Could a few more years of fighting be preferable to this? Was it better to use the bombs because it caused less deaths than what a land invasion would? Was the bomb the only way to defeat Japan? Who knows what the state of the world would be today if the bombs were never used or invented? How would Japan be like if it never felt the pain of the bomb? Some of you probably have already answered all these questions in your head, and some of you will probably need time to think about this. I know what I think, but I'll let you decide what you think. This is why Dr. Serizawa is such a tragic and relatable character. Now, a new superweapon to throw upon us all? As a scientist, no, as a human being. I cannot allow that to happen, Dr. Serizawa. Yet, he is in this predicament. This great evil is still out there and will return. Serizawa is then exposed to a newscast showing the destruction while the song Prayer for Peace plays. Emiko, who was there who saw the aftermath of Gojira's walk, and Ogata are finally able to convince Serizawa into using this weapon to kill Gojira. So he burns all his notes and plans of the oxygen destroyer. Funny that the one-eyed man can see so much. Serizawa is the one-eyed man in a blind society, and he knows the consequences. Serizawa also holds the belief that humans are weak, and even with his notes gone, the information is still in his head. So he does the unthinkable. A rare look at Gojira, seeing him living out his day underwater, not destroying tanks or burning buildings. Gojira is seemingly a peaceful animal. Soon it will all be over. This scene is accompanied by an excellent score by Akira Ifukube called Gojira Under the Sea, a perfect piece of tragedy and sorrow. As Serizawa detonates his weapon, killing Gojira, Serizawa proceeds to cut his own line, killing himself, making sure the information of the oxygen destroyer can never be figured out. 2 unintentional monsters die. This is especially poignant considering this is the first Japanese movie since the war, I think, to show a man sacrificing himself. Yeah, during American occupation, they weren't big on that. Yamane is also one of my favorite characters, and I hope I'm saying that right. First of all, that mustache is unforgettable, but his philosophy is something that shows up in many of the sequels. The idea Gojira shouldn't be killed. He sees this animal that survived the H-bomb testing, and he knows that if he finds out how Gojira is able to survive this, can be extremely useful. Also, he knows the importance of this animal, a dinosaur. Now, dinosaur science in the 50s was different, or maybe the guy who wrote these subtitles was really wrong, because they state Gojira must be from the Jurassic period 2 million years ago. Now, the Jurassic period was actually 145 million years ago, whatever, it doesn't mess with the message of this movie. But this find is so valuable, a prehistoric animal still living. Yamane just can't understand why everyone wants to kill Gojira. However, he never works as an antagonistic force. He does not stop Serizawa from executing his plan to kill Gojira. It is an interesting movie because there is no antagonist. Anyway, Yamane represents the scientist who appreciates all discoveries and would not destroy a discovery because simply it's something new. It adds to the world. Destroying it would take away from the world. Yamane appreciates life and science. Emiko is the character with a strong moral code and is not a scientist, so she does not hold these same ideas of Serizawa and Yamane, because she would have kept the oxygen destroyer secret if it wasn't for Gojira destroying Tokyo. She is a major character in the story because of how much she drives it. Her decision to reveal the oxygen destroyer to Ogata and to convince Serizawa did stop Gojira. This film encapsulates such a different time, a time when the nuclear bomb was still new, and still a fear to the whole island and to the whole world. Despite the fact we have urgent matters on our hands right now, a crisis killing thousands of people a day, the nuclear arsenals of countries around the world are still intact and viable for use. As long as these weapons exist, so does Gojira. The ignorance of man will keep this creature alive for what I will think will be quite a long time. Undefeatable, unleashed by humanity, Gojira of fire. Best to leave this video off with a quote from the director himself. Monsters are tragic beings. They are born too tall, too strong, too heavy. They are not evil by choice. That is their tragedy. Ishiro Honda.